In this series on how to reduce noise in car interior, this episode covers how to reduce tyre noise in your car. There are two sources of tyre noise in the cabin: tyre noise generated by your own car and tyre noise generated by other cars on the road around you. Keeping out tyre noise from these two sources requires different road noise reduction strategies. In this video I'm discussing keeping out the road noise from your own car. And the two big areas for this are in the boot, whether it's a saloon, estate or hatch, and the wheel arches. Of course, that may seem obvious. After all, that's where the wheels are, and we're talking about road noise or tyre noise. So to reduce road noise, we need to apply noise reduction material. And noise reduction materials come in a variety of forms, and they all have slightly different jobs to do. But the first one is this butyl product. It's a sheet material made of a butyl rubber, adhesive on the back, and usually with an aluminium foil on the front. We'll get to how to fit noise reduction mat in a few moments. But the first question is, where do we apply this mat? You'll undoubtedly have seen other videos where they've applied this kind of matting all over the boot floor, the spare wheel well, all up the wheel arch sides, and even on the boot lid. And you can't see any original bodywork at all because there's no gaps. Fitting that much butyl mat has two disadvantages. First, there's the cost of all the mat, and second, that's a considerable amount of weight to add to your car. If you have a look at your boot floor, you'll undoubtedly notice, like I've got just here, that the original equipment manufacturer has already fitted some what I call heavy layer, but you'll notice that they fit relatively small pads in a variety of areas. And the primary reason for that is cost and weight, exactly as we just mentioned. And weight is a very important subject in car production these days. So how do we go about taking a more targeted approach? I've just mentioned about what the OE fits, and of course the OE has the capability to do CAD modelling of acoustics, laboratories where they can test the car with various noise and road inputs and test different solutions and come up with a solution that meets their noise targets but which adds as little weight and cost to the vehicle as possible. Since we want to take a more targeted approach rather than just covering the whole floor in butyl mat, consider that the OE has already done a lot of the work for us using their facilities. We of course don't have the kind of facilities that the OE's got. We have to go by feel and our own ears. Now I've already done this area, and you can also see that I've marked on here where the original OE mats were. There was a 10-inch long mat there, there's a 12-inch strip here, and there's a small piece there, and further round in the middle there's this 12-inch piece here. You can bet your bottom dollar that wherever the OE has fitted these mats, they've fitted them into position to get the maximum benefit for the minimum cost and weight. So if we want to get more benefit, also for lower cost and weight, then what we should do is follow their lead and fit more around the areas where the OE has already fitted it. That small mat there, I've fitted a big A4 mat there. This wheel arch, there was this 12-inch strip up this wheel arch, so I've covered that wheel arch in butyl strip as well. I've also done the inside of the external panel. The OE had fitted a 12x6 butyl pad in there, so again I've fitted some more around there. So how did I decide to put all this butyl strip on this wheel arch here? Well, first of all, along the bottom here, there's a seam runs all the way along where the wheel arch joins the boot floor. If I show you the other side where I haven't done yet, the problem with that seam is that the other side of that seam is under the wheel arch and is sealed with seam sealer, but seam sealer isn't a noise reduction material. From the inside I could see that there were gaps between the panels along the seam. So all the way along the bottom of that seam there, I've put a strip of butyl overlapping the seam to cut off any noise path that might exist. On this area of the wheel arch here, if I knock on the work that I've done now, you can hear how dull it sounds, that knock. And if I do a sound analyzer trace using an app on my phone, you can see where the peak hold is on the orange line. And if I do the same thing on the other wheel arch where I haven't put any extra material yet, you can hear how hollow and tinny that sounds. Again, if I put up the peak hold analyzer trace and then overlay the two, you can see how much difference it makes at different frequencies. And in particular, the reduction is in the 1 to 4 kilohertz region, which is the peak human hearing range. And that actually makes this a good opportunity to tell you why I've not done a before and after road test in this video, to show you the difference. If you look at those traces, you can see that in the higher frequency ranges there's very little effect, and at the very bottom end of the frequency range is around 100. The actual decibel reduction at some of those frequencies was quite astounding, as much as 15 decibels in some places, but mostly around the 4 or 5 decibel mark. But the overall noise reduction in the car when you're driving along won't feel like 5 decibels, because that would be a massive reduction in noise. Probably only 1 or 2 decibels at best overall on an A-weighted scale. But what it will have done is reduced those frequencies in the peak range of human hearing, which will have reduced what's known as the harshness of the sound. Indeed, that's one of the things that original equipment manufacturers do when they analyse the sound in cars. They record the sound using very high quality digital equipment and then put it through computer programs which measure both the peak dBs and the factor called harshness, and also another factor which affects the ability of passengers in the car to converse effectively at normal speaking volumes. Once you consider that you've put a sufficient amount of what I call heavy layer on the panel, the next material to consider is noise reduction foam. Now this foam is 10mm thick. You can buy it in various thicknesses, and you can buy it on the roll, or you can buy it in sheets like this. For the wheel arches, you definitely want to cut a sufficiently large piece and maybe cut some slits in it to help you fold it around so that you cover the whole of the wheel arch area in one piece if at all possible. Remove any attachments on the body while you're doing that, but obviously make sure that you can fit them back on afterwards. We talked about following the OE's lead, and that exactly is the OE's lead, but I'm lucky enough that in this Saab, the original equipment manufacturer fitted a whole wheel arch sound pad, which is made of foam on one side, some heavy layer butyl on the other, which, as you can see, covers the whole of the wheel arch and is moulded to the wheel arch shape, even taking into account the ribs in the panels. This stuff is at its most effective when it's in contact with the panel. In fact, it's at its most effective if you actually stick it to the panel. So I'm actually going to do that. The manufacturer can't go to the lengths of putting adhesive and double-sided tape on it, because that would massively increase the labour of the job and increase the cost of car production. So I've applied double-sided tape, continuous run all around the edges, and then a crisscross, particularly on the flat areas in the middle. And of course, don't forget to put back any clips or fir trees that might have been in place. I'll do the front end of this sound insulation when I come to working on the wheel arch area underneath the rear seat bolsters. Any holes in the panels allow noise through. Taking our lead from the manufacturer, in this top corner up here, on both sides of this boot, the manufacturer has fitted a thick foam pad. Obviously, there's a noise problem at the top corner here, which the manufacturer feels this is worth suppressing. But what I'm going to do, temporarily remove the foam pad, get rid of the sticky. Indeed, inside here, on the other side of this hole, there's another foam pad. But I've cut a square of butyl that I can stick over this area that will completely cover this hole and wrap round this harness that passes through it, blocking off any noise path. Press the butyl pad into position, and with some of my double-sided sticky tape, put the pad back in the position that I found it. I'm also going to put a little more butyl just around this corner and fold it onto this corner here. Now let me show you how to fit this noise reduction mat. Once you've decided where you're going to fit it, if necessary, cut it to shape. Use an old pair of scissors if you can, because you're probably going to ruin them. Again, I'm following the manufacturer's lead. You can bet that where they've fitted this relatively small piece of matting, a big piece of mat will give me a significant improvement. So I'm just going to fit two of these pieces. First of all, clean your panel down and give it a wipe with some spirit cleaner. Meths is good. You could even just use a bit of window cleaner just to make sure that there's no grease or wax that's going to prevent this stuff from sticking. And once it's cut to shape, peel off the backing, put it gently into position, and then starting at one end, fold it onto the contours of the panel and the mat, and then the other tool that you will need, which is very important, is a roller. This is just a rubber decorating roller from the local hardware store, and roller the whole of the mat vigorously. Part of the reason why these mats have this crisscross pattern in the aluminium, that you're supposed to be able to see that pattern flatten out as you roller it. It's very important to get a really good mechanical connection between the mat and the metalwork. The adhesive that's on the back of the mat is generally, it's a pressure sensitive adhesive, so it needs pressure to be able to wet the metal surface and stick to it. But the reason why you need a good connection, quite simply, is for efficient energy transfer from the panel to the mat, so that the mat can turn that energy into heat. Some people say that you should roller this until this pattern has completely disappeared. I'm not sure that it's necessary to be quite so OCD about it, but certainly you should make a good job of rollering it. Looking into the spare wheel well, again, follow the manufacturer's lead. Saab clearly thought it was worth their while to fit a complete round heavy layer pad on the whole of the bottom of the wheel well. So I'm following their lead and covering the base of the spare wheel well with butyl layer, along with some round the sides. I've put extra on this side because that's where the exhaust is. And yes, the exhaust is right below my hi-fi amp. I've also added heavy layer and some foam underneath the amplifier and bolted it back down more firmly. Hopefully cut down on vibrations getting into the amplifier, including the rear wall of the spare wheel well too. And followed up with a 6mm or 10mm layer of foam all the way over the boot floor, extending it right across to do the whole floor, including the wheel well. I've put extra on this side again because this is the side with the exhaust on. And also, top tip, the wheel well here is a good place to use some of your offcuts rather than cutting a single piece, so reducing your wastage. If your car's got wheel arch liners, then consider that the wheel arch liners are the first line of defence against road noise coming into the car. So we'll be wanting to treat them. So you'll need to take them off first. Give it a good clean down with soap and water, particularly on this back side, which is where we're going to be sticking some sound insulation. Once it's dry, give the surface a little degrease again with some meths or other spirit wipe. Many manufacturers do fit sound insulation behind the wheel arch liners. From 2007 on the 9.3, Saab fitted this to the back of the wheel arch liners at the rear. And again, following that lead, the amount of sound insulation they've put here clearly tells you that this is an area well worth treating. Now you might need to remove whatever sound insulation is already fitted, because you might find that it's no longer in very good condition. Some manufacturers just fit blocks of felt, and certainly after sort of 7 or 8 years they'll be virtually disintegrated. As you're removing the liner from the car, have a good look behind the liner to the bodywork, get a good idea of how much space you've got between the liner and the bodywork, so that you can see how much thickness of material you've got available to you. We don't need a great deal. There are bound to be some areas where the liner is pushed quite hard up against the body. The chances are though that you will have room to fit a 2mm layer of butyl. I'm making use of this old sound insulation pad from mine to cut a hole and some slits so I can fit this butyl pad at the top here. Find some way of supporting your wheel arch liner from the other side of you, and make sure to give it a good rollering again, especially around the edges. And so on until you've covered your wheel arch liner in butyl panel. A word of caution though, don't forget that this butyl panel is quite heavy. I've added 5 pieces that are each almost the size of an A4 sheet of paper, and I've weighed it. That means I've added almost 1 kilo to this wheel arch liner. Be conscious of how your wheel arch liner fits into your car and how it's fixed. Make sure that you're happy that the fixings that hold the liner into place can withstand the extra weight. If the fixings are corroded or rotten or broken, then consider fixing them. I'll be doing a video on that particular subject actually, so keep an eye out for it. Then cover as much of the reverse side of the arch liner with sound absorbing foam. This is 6mm foam that I've used here. You can get 10, but this is also fairly compressible because I know that there are some areas where it's very close to the body. Now your wheel arch is ready to refit. Now I have already done this with my front wheel arch liners, but I wasn't able to put as much foam as this on the front ones because the front wheel arch liner is very close to the body in quite a large number of areas. Nevertheless, I got a significant reduction in road noise from the front wheels. So I'm very much looking forward to putting this back on the car and experiencing a super quiet ride, especially with all the extra soundproofing I'm putting in the boot area and under the back seat. What we've done in the boot is effective already. I had to go out in the car last night, and even though I haven't put all the trim back in yet, I can already tell that the car's quieter. If you've done your boot and it's made enough of a difference for you for your car, great. But if you'd like a bit more improvement, remove the rear seat squab, follow the exact same technique on the panel work below the seat squab. Again, be very careful. You will not have much space under there. So cover it in a layer of butyl first, make sure that your seat fits back in okay, then try some foam or felt. Also the side bolsters for your rear seats, remove those and put some on the front side of the wheel arch. Again, remember the wheel arch is directly behind here, so this is exactly where the road noise is coming in, so you can get more substantial improvement in this area. If your car's got non-folding seats and it's got a bulkhead behind, then treat the bulkhead as well. This car's got folding seats and it's just a big space there. All that remains now for me anyway is to put the spare wheel back in and all the trim back in the boot, which I had out anyway. I didn't just take it out for this job, I had all the trim out of the boot for the job on the wheel arches. In further videos in this series, I'll look at how to get rid of road noise that comes in from other vehicles, also how to reduce engine and wind noise. So I hope you found this useful for starters, and I shall see you next time.